What if I told you everything you've been hearing about the strikes is untrue? You'd be pretty shocked, right? Well, wait until the end and you're in for the biggest shock ever. The reality is, institutions such as the BBC have failed the British public by failing to tell the truth about why the RMT, the RCN, and many others are currently on strike. Let's take a look at Mick Lynch's latest appearance on BBC Politics Live to learn a bit more.
Because as we've heard, we've got a wave of industrial action. We have got nurses going on strike for the first time in their history. So would a pay rise at inflation, let's take today's latest figures, 10.5%, just over %, would that be in the ballpark?
Well, our union's policy is for a substantial increase in salaries. We don't tie it to a particular level of inflation. RPI is the reference point, and RPI is taken off like a balloon that's gone loose. Nobody can catch it. And this myth that the Tories are putting round that workers' wages have created inflation is an utter fallacy.
Well, they're saying pay rises would.
Well, we haven't had any pay rises. How can our members' inflation of wages contributed to inflation when they haven't had any at all?
Bosh, bosh, bosh. Bosh, there it is. This is coming out everyone's mouth, that pay rises will worsen inflation. Now let me ask you this. In the last 3 years, have public sector workers received a pay rise? Yes or no? The answer is no. In the last 3 years, has inflation skyrocketed? Yes or no? Yes. So, is there a link between those two? Probably not, as a result of the evidence we've got for the last 3 or 4 years. Because if you look at inflation, two of the biggest things that are actually inflating in cost are rent and food shopping. So these are things that will impact the ordinary worker. And the reality is, if you're on the same pay as last year, but your food shopping's gone up £10, £20, it could spell disaster for a lot of people. And it gets worse. The BBC continues to parrot this line in Joe Coburn's next question after Mick Lynch. Let's take a look.
At all.
Do his members deserve, Mick Lynch's members, deserve a pay rise substantially more than 4%? Let's take the 10.7%, today's inflation figure.
Now, that was an absolutely abhorrent question. Do the RMT members deserve a pay rise? From someone who's probably on upwards of 200 grand a year, it's absolutely disgusting to hear a question asked as to whether or not people deserve a pay rise above the rate of inflation, which means that they will receive a pay rise, not a pay cut. I'm shocked, right? But the reality is I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked, actually. I've changed my mind. Because this is how the BBC frame things. If you look at the disputes between the RMT and Network Rail, you'll realise the Network Rail have tried to cut health and safety standards across train lines. They've tried to cut the amount of staff they employ, while still retaining the profits they do, whilst we, as the public, invest in the railways. It's disgusting. And at the same time, ticket prices are going up. So realistically, where should the conversation be held? Should it be held on the grounds of members deserving a pay rise, or should it be held on the grounds of Network Rail should be held accountable for all the money they've spent and failed to reinvest into the community and into their staff? That should be the conversation. We shouldn't be looking at someone like Mick Lynch to come up with all the answers as to why inflation is where it is and why people can't afford to heat their homes, because that's not his fault. It's the fault of those that are taking in the profits of our misery, right? Whilst we suffer, these guys are being paid upwards of 400, 500 grand a year, not including shareholder bonuses. Because, you know, we don't get that kind of stuff. They do. Mick Lynch doesn't get that. His members don't get that. But there's no discussion as to whether or not the shareholders deserve a pay rise, is there? And this highlights a fundamental issue with the media in this country. It is failing to hold accountable those responsible for economic downturn in the UK, those responsible for the abhorrent wealth accumulation in the last few years, especially during the pandemic. It's failed to do that. So what do we need? We need new media. So make sure you join Real Talk Today. That's us. Subscribe, join the family. And I look forward to seeing you in the comments and let me know what you think about this. See you in the next one. Peace out.